Because we know this as ANC, and previously we found it up behind the glove box, it seems like a good enough place to start on this dash assembly. Now they have this nice piece of painted material up here. We don't want to have anything happen to that, so we put some blue tape over it. There's a panel here that looks like it needs to be removed. We'll take our same panel tool and remove it. And the ANC module is exactly where I remember it. So located right up here, below the airbag, but above the glove box, is the module. Now on these particular vehicles, in order to bypass it, all you have to do is unplug it. We don't want it to get plugged back in by accident, so we're actually going to move it out of the way and zip tie it to this harness here. If a mechanic or something like that starts working on the car, they don't go, oh, and click it in and then everything goes crazy. Now that we have the ANC sorted out, it's time to move on to get to the brain of the radio. We don't necessarily need to get to this, because this is just a touch panel. We need to get behind the radio and get to the plug so we can do some testing. To do that, there's some side panels here that need to be removed. You have to pull out the push to start, and then this whole panel will come out and unplug. Once we've gotten to the actual radio brain, we can go ahead and plug these panels back in. At this point, we will be turning on and off the key because we need to do some sound testing. One of the reasons why a normal radio will have such a hard time coming in here, the radio is actually shaped to where it's facing down. So normally these would be going into the dash, and now they're not, they're going straight up and down. That's actually not the end of the world, because some radios are becoming two pieces, meaning the screen and the brain are two totally different parts, in which case we can mount the screen up top and the radio down below. What we just need is the part that talks to the car, which there are companies out there that are developing. But what I need out of this is the factory harness, the one that the speakers are in. That's the one we need in order to integrate our system. Located all the way in the back. Behind all this, there is a gray plug, that one right there. One of the nice things about this becoming more and more popular, meaning integrating into the factory radio, and those same companies that are coming up with solutions are coming up with harnesses for those solutions. What we have here is a T-harness, one that'll plug into the radio and one that will plug into the factory harness, and it gives us our speaker level output, and then we can tie into these for our signal without having to get into the dash and cut that harness up. We don't want to do this. It's a brand new car. To use this, this comes with a bunch of wiring that we won't be using. We're not going to be using the product this attaches to. Once we validate all our testing, we'll go ahead and pull this all apart and just have the wires that we need. But for now, we're just going to get this plugged into the back of the radio, or in this case, the bottom of the radio. Now, because the manufacturers really don't want us to do what we're doing to this car, they've gone ahead and made things increasingly difficult for us. One of the things that they've added into the mix is what's called load resistance. Load resistance is the speaker connected to the radio. It sees that as a load. When that load goes away, that channel shuts off because it feels there could be something wrong. In order to protect itself and not blow up, it just turns it off. The other side effect to that is that load also smooths out the sound of the amplifier. In some cases, when you don't have that load on there, the amplifier ramps up and can cause the tweeters to make funny high frequency noises. So you have to be real careful there. There are ways to test for that, and we're going to do that now. We also want to make sure that there is in fact no amplifier, and that's going to be the first test we do. So let's head over to the toolbox and grab some tools. The first thing we want to grab is just a tone generator. What a tone generator is designed to do is just that. It creates a tone, and we should hear it in the speakers. So that's telling us right away we have no amplifier. Now we want to grab the RTA. Now to perform this test, this RTA is connected to the driver's door that does not have any load resistance on it from any speaker. This one is connected to the passenger door, which is active right now. And what we want to do is see if there's any differences. Both left and right appear to be playing the exact same. We can look at our peak light indicators here and see if they match, and they do. We're also looking at the signal that's coming out of the radio. There's a huge hump here, dip here, and then some bass roll off through there. It's not the best signal I've ever seen, but then again, it's not the worst. We can EQ it and fix that. Now, one of the tests that we need to perform on the output of the radio is how much voltage is coming out of the radio that's going to be going into the input of our amplifier. amplifier. This is a very important piece of information to know. You don't want to put too much voltage in. For example, if it will only take 6 volts of input and you're putting 10 volts of input, you're going to hurt the amplifier. To test for this, we're going to play a 1000 hertz test tone out of the radio. We're going to use our digital multimeter here set to AC, turn it up and see what happens. Now make sure when you do this test, you have your speakers disconnected. So it's topping off between 9 3/4 and 10 volts, which is in the operating range of the amplifier we are going to put in, so we're good there. While we're testing the output voltage, another test we want to do is something called DC offset. DC offset is something that has become kind of the norm for turning on an amplifier when you're doing an install like this. There's a 6 volt DC output that comes from the radio when it turns on, and the amplifier or high level or DSP or whatever it is you're using is designed to see that and turn itself on, and then when it goes away it turns itself off. We want to test for that, because if it doesn't have it, then we need to find a different way to turn on our amplifier. You simply take your ground probe and attach it to negative, and then me personally, I like to use the signal's positive output. I'll attach my red probe to that, set it to DC, and we'll turn the car on. And immediately we see voltage going up, and it just stops somewhere right before or at 6 volts. Now as we can see, the radio is on, but the audio is off. And this is where this gets tricky, because a lot of things still pass through the audio section of the radio, such as Bluetooth navigation, which still has to function even though there is no source playing on the radio. We still see this current. Now we'll turn the car back off. And there we go, it drops out to nothing. Another thing that kind of freaks people out with DC offset, you can easily just like hit unlock on the key fob or pull up on the handle, and it'll wake the car up and turn on the DC offset, because the radio is prepping itself to do something. When it doesn't see anything, then it'll go back to sleep. We get calls all the time from people going, dude, my amp never shuts off, my amp never shuts off. And I go, well, wait a minute, of course it shuts off. No, every time I open the door, it's on. So you say, do me a favor, shut the door, sit in the car, and then tell me if your amp shuts off. For this particular install, there's nothing too crazy that we have to do. It's just 4-channel output from the radio, which is what we were hoping for because it has the basic system. However, this could have got a lot more interesting if it would have had the amplified system and we would have had to do summing. Summing is where you take 2 speakers, such as a tweeter and a mid-range, and blend the 2 of them together to create one signal. There's some attenuation that needs to be done between them. Sometimes they do filtering between the 2 that can cause us heartache. We can test for that as well with this device here, which is a phase summer that allows us to feed both the tweeter and the mid-range, or whatever channels it is that we want to bring together, and flip the switches on at the same time, looking at the RTA, and we can see what's going on, see if there's any dips or if there's any bumps that may cause problems and that we'll have to address in the tune itself. We're not going to have those problems with this, so it doesn't look like it needs any load resisting. Now we have a clear path how we're going to get signal out of the radio. What we need to do next, figure out how we're going to mount the amplifier underneath this seat and get that built so we can get it into the car. This is the amplifier. As you can see, there's a nice shelf here. We want to bring this up high like that off of the floor so that this floor mat will still go back in, and also that vent will still blow forward. There is plenty of room in which we can do that. So we're going to take some measurements. We're going to make a T shape that goes across between these 2 and then goes forward. It is going to probably tongue into this area here and use that as the lock for the front mount of the amplifier. To make this amplifier mount, we're going to make it out of ABS. ABS is strong and rigid. We're going to use 1/4 inch. The basic shape we're going after is something that's going to resemble this. I'm hoping to add in this little extra area here that's going to go where the vent is. It's going to dip down here, go lower, then dip back up. And then the last thing we might do, I don't know yet, is add a front panel to cover where the controls are on the amplifier. Now let's head over to the saw and cut some plastic. We need to draw our basic shape on this. ABS has this textured side on one side and a shiny flat side on the other. I like to draw my layout on the back side. We've already gone ahead and found our center point and also our 2 narrow spots. We need to add in the T's. These 2 areas right here we do need to remove. while we were over there cutting this out, we also went ahead and added a round over to this front lip here and all across this top. The reason why we went ahead and did it now before we actually get to our final shape is that this isn't going to change here across the front or on the sides. And once the bend goes into this, we're not going to be able to router it. Now, as far as the height goes, we need to get it about a 1/2 inch. So we're going to use this piece of Sintra as a shape, and then we'll use these two pieces to actually pinch and round it in. To heat up our corners, we simply just use a torch because we're actually going to be bending about 1 inch. And if we were to just put it onto the plexi bender, it wouldn't give us the double bend we need. Now we just want to kind of push it into place while holding the top down, and then we wait because, you know, we have to wait for it to cool down. Now once it becomes rigid, like that actually happens pretty fast. It'll still be extremely hot, but we can take it over and put water on it to cool it down. I'll repeat the process on this other side. Now the next step is to remove the area that will allow this to tongue into where the air vent is. And that is this spot here and this spot here. And this is what we ended up with. We also went ahead and rounded this over as well and did a full round over on this side so that it will slide into place. Now let's take this into the car. So that's exactly what we're looking for. What we need to do now is drill out these holes here, make an indentation for this and that on both sides. That should work. You want to screw the bolts all the way into place to test fit this, because if it's loose, there could be play. You want to make sure that this is your final product. Now we'll go ahead and slide the seat back and see if it rubs on the amplifier. And because we planned accordingly, that light is the top of the amplifier. We have about 1 inch of gap above the amplifier. So we took good measurements. Now we need to get this back out and wire it up. Now speaking of wiring, there's a couple things we're doing differently that we didn't talk about this morning as far as the wiring goes. Because we've been able to run wires into the doors, we're gonna mount the crossovers inside like we did talk about. For that, we're going to make a mount up here and behind the glove box in this area. There's a lot of room up in here. Put both crossovers up in here and then run wires out to the speakers. Now one more thing I wanna do before we get to the wiring is I saw where this was sitting back there, and he's got 2 kids, and I am worried about them kicking this. We're going to make a panel that sits here. We're gonna put these style nutserts into here. These are gonna screw in, and then this will screw into there, and that will hold that up against the amplifier. And also, you can unscrew it and screw it as many times as you like. So this amplifier is 2 inches tall. We're gonna go all the way across. We'll just go 12. So I need 12.5 by 2 inches. Now I want this right up against the amplifier, because when these kids kick, I don't want this thing to go anywhere. I don't want it to break off. To screw these in, they have an Allen head input. We have a nice panel, nice and rigid. Kiddies can kick the crap out of it. We've also sanded these flush so that they don't interfere with the floor mat. One of the things that's unique to this particular amplifier is that it has no fuses on it, which isn't all that unique per se. They give you this with these instructions telling you that this needs to be mounted back by the amplifier. So you need one under the hood and you need one back by the amplifier. Just in case you're one of those people that don't read the instructions, they make it abundantly clear that read those. What that means is that somewhere on this, we need to put this fuse holder. This is going to be straight across here, so we don't really have that room. I don't want to put it here. So looking at the car, it could mount right here below the amp board, something where the amp rises up like this. I have a little bit of room here, so I can make a piece of plastic that comes off here at an L, and this attaches to just like that. And then there's enough room here for the wire to come up and go into the amplifier. And this, of course, will go off into the car to go to the battery. So now we need to fabricate this little L bracket here. Now what I want to do is put something underneath it to kind of get an idea of how high it needs to be, so I can get my measurements. That's about the right height. So this is what I'm looking at, and I've gone ahead and round over these sides again, but not this, because this is going to need to screw in. Because this is a longer piece and it needs to be very fine where the bend is, we're actually going to cut a 1/16 of an inch in here as a marker. Once hot, and there we go. Now that we have the amplifier mounted, the fuse holder mounted, we're going to do the final fit to make sure this all goes in the way it's supposed to, and then we'll start getting our wires attached. As you can see, the fuse holder's mounted over there. This kick panel will keep everyone out. We still have room up underneath. We can still get this out fairly simple. The seat will slide back, and when the seat's back, all you'll see is this right here. This amplifier has the ability to do high level input or low level input. It's a simple switch on the amplifier, and it's done via the RCAs. There's no external input. What we found works best for us are these. They're made from Stinger. It's a pigtail RCA that has speaker wires on one end and a male RCA on the other. We can attach these to wiring and run them directly up into the dash. For this, we're also putting in a bass knob. Power is going to be on this side and go up the driver's side of the car. And then all the signal is going to go out this way over to the passenger side of the car, along with the subwire coming across. These are going to come up and go into the dash this way, so probably just straight over and turn. Power wire will loop around here, come and attach in here. The ground may follow it the same way and come down. 12 is first, ground is second. We might put them up on a vertical to bring them around into this. But regardless, let's go ahead and get some wire and start getting some stuff in. I'm going to start from this side and work my way across that way. First thing here is the subwoofer wire. For that, we're going to be running a 12 gauge wire that's going to go from here all the way into the trunk. So we're going to need about 10 feet of 12 gauge. For all the wire we're going to run through this install, it's all going to be covered in either some form of sleeving, or it's going to be insulated in some form of tape. It just gives it a more finished look and of course protects the wire. Because we need this to come out of the amplifier and immediately take a turn, we want to stagger the wire tips here. As you can see, when you bend the wire like this, one immediately becomes longer than the other. We want to avoid that because then they don't go in properly. So we'll just shorten that one, make sure that they're both the same length now that they're turned. Because this type of terminal is a set screw and twist down. If you just put the raw wire in there, it's going to tear the raw wire. We use our product called a ferrule, and what it's designed to do is sleeve over the wire to protect that. And they have a tool that crimps it into place. Put some heat shrink over the ends. Now the reason we're putting this tape here is because now what we're going to do is we're going to drill zip tie holes extremely close to this so that this guy can get pulled in nice and tight, and we don't want the drill to scratch it. Because this is going to be a floating amp rack, we can put our zip tie heads, that's this bigger area here, on the bottom of the amp rack because there's going to be nothing there to hit them. Cut them flush using a set of flush cutters, otherwise they will hurt you. Anytime you have a fuse holder that comes in a kit, always tighten the fuse. You don't know if the guy tightened it up, he might have been having a bad day at the factory, so make sure you tighten it. If it's loose, it's going to vibrate around and it's going to burn the wire up. Now just like the smaller wire, we have a ferrule for it, and then when we add our heat shrink, we have custom heat shrink made that has our logo on it, and of course they're all the right colors so that people know who put it in. Once it's cool to the touch, tighten it down. And we went ahead and also made up the ground version, so we'll do the same thing. This line here is where the wire has to stop. So I'm thinking that if I stack them on top of one another, they'll both do the turn here. I might notch this right here so that the wire turns better, but let's get this front half done first. Both wires are snaking around, stacked on top of one another, keeps that footprint small, and then they're looping around, attaching in here. The ground, when it loops around, it stacks on top of these and uses that same zip tie. So now they're both going to catch up with one another and go into the car. We put heat shrink on the ends of all our RCAs so we know which channel is which. We use the standard color, purple, green, gray, white. To get signal from the radio to these RCAs, we're going to use a product called Speedwire. It's a 9-conductor wire that has the same colors that we have here, and it also has remote turn on. Now, even though we're not going to be using the remote turn on in this installation, we are going to go ahead and hook it up so that if something is to happen, we will have it already pre-wired in the amplifier. We just need to solder in our like pairs, so white to white, gray to gray. The other thing that makes this very nice doing it this way, when we were doing our testing, there's a plug that's on the harness we're going to be using to allow you to plug in your speakers. That plug we can remove from the harness and attach to our speed wire. That will allow us to just simply plug in our speed wire behind the radio. We won't have to do any soldering or tight connection there. So I took a quick moment to go look at the car to figure out which way I wanted to route these wires, if I wanted to come this way or if I wanted to come this way and turn like this. And I've decided that this would be the best course. So now we're gonna bring this wire around and it will also follow suit like that. And then our speaker wires will do the same thing. They'll come down this center path right here. Doing that, we're gonna be using these holes, the same holes we're gonna be using for this. So they're gonna be sharing a hole. So when you do that, you have to be real careful on where the head goes. On the back here, we've already done that. Where the motor turn on runs next to the subwire, and you notice the way the two heads are. You have to make sure that they keep going in that same direction. You could drill a hole here if we wanted and lock in place and just keep going this way and have no issues. If we have to go this way, you always have to start like this and then move your way out. You'd remove these and replace them. We have a white and gray 16 gauge that we've covered in shielding. Now we're going to apply the ferrules to the end as well as color-coded heat shrink to match the corner of the car that it's going. Putting the speaker wire in, we don't want to over tighten it. We just want to lock it in place so like as soon as it hits, stop there, because we're still going to have to do our gain adjustment on this and we have to take our speaker wires off to do that. And there we have it. The amplifier is all set and ready to get installed in the car. One of the things to think about when you are putting the zip ties in place, where we soldered these wires together here, we want to make sure we don't put a zip tie over that solder joint. Put it before it, put it after it, don't put it at the solder point. You don't want to crush that down tight with a zip tie. Now, one of the things I'm told unique is about our installs is the way we actually run wires. I build the amplifier amp rack, put it in the car, and run my wires out to everything in the car. I know a lot of installers will run the wires to a central location, sit in a very uncomfortable place for many hours and wire it up. When I was doing all my custom fabrication, it was easier to put the amplifiers in after you'd cover the pieces and build out as you go, so you could, like Legos, drop these pieces into the vehicle with the product already on it, wire zip tied up. That has evolved on into what we're doing now, where we're making these complex shapes to mount amplifiers in the vehicle, zip tying the wires into location and getting it nice and pretty on the bench, and then running them forward into the car. One of the nice side effects is we spend less time in the vehicle because we're doing all the work here on the bench.